Really happy to be here and happy to be talking about text messaging. If you don't know M&R, we're an agency. We work entirely with nonprofits. We do fundraising, we do campaign strategy, we do advertising, digital organizing, media relations, social media. We do it all. And one of the things that we are really well known for is our annual benchmarks report. We get together about 200 to 250 organizations every year. We benchmark a lot of kind of the trends in the industry. And so I head up our data team at M&R, and so I work a lot on this report. And one of the things that we're always keeping an eye on is how text messaging changes every year. So just kind of teeing this up with a few kind of, if you're not thinking about text messaging, here's a few reasons why you should be. One of the big things from our study this past year was that nonprofit text messaging lists were growing faster than email. So while email lists declined by about 2%, text messaging lists grew by 11%. We also saw the kind of average nonprofit sending about 60 emails a year to their supporters, or that might be the average experience of the person on someone on an email list is getting about 60 emails from that organization. Text messaging is about a third of that. So in terms of how often people are communicating, there's kind of room to scale up in the text messaging space. And then finally, just kind of in terms of the overall size of these programs, there's about 236 mobile subscribers per email subscriber, or per 1,000 email subscribers on a nonprofit email list. So this is a stat that 4 years ago it was like 72. So we're seeing a lot of growth in the nonprofit space on this. And one of the things I've started to see more and more frequently for many of my clients is that when they send out a text message now, it often raises more than when they send out an email. And so for an individual message, it's kind of really, many years ago it was maybe more of an afterthought. Now it's like, actually, no, this is like the big part of the program, and just hope to see more and more of that. Pass it over.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Robin Stegman. I'm the Associate Director of Digital Advocacy at Ocean Conservancy. I've been running our mobile program now for 4 years. This is just an example of some of the messages that we send out. We have things like, we just did a personality quiz a couple of months ago where we had people text in and they had like a kind of text response about different personality questions, and they got to find out what ocean animal they are. We also do that for fundraising and advocacy, and also just getting to share some of our wonderful content about ocean animals. Just a quick summary. Our mobile campaign started in 2017. We switched to a dedicated shortcode. That is the wrong date. We just switched to a dedicated shortcode last year, which is a great compliance process that if anybody has questions, happy to answer. Most of people come from our donation and advocacy pages. And I would say in terms of how we use our mobile list, we are very picture heavy. We are more focused on advocacy and cultivation, but we have at least one fundraising message a month. Our list is smaller, but we have far more engagement in terms of people clicking through, responding, and taking action or donating. So they're a small but mighty group. I just wanted to share one success story and then I'll move over, but something to think about when you're doing your mobile list is it is a lot harder with mobile compliance to get opt-ins. And so thinking about when you're getting into mobile, not just replicating the messages that you have on email, but thinking about what is a unique experience you can give people to really entice them to join your mobile list and make that opt-in. So one of our success stories is Trivia Tuesday. So we send a ocean trivia question every Tuesday. And this is you can see these green bars at the end. You can see where that Trivia Tuesday starts. So this is our average engagement rate. And once we start doing trivia, we have almost 80% of people on our Trivia Tuesday list respond to our trivia question. Plus, they are twice as likely to click on an action alert or a donation page if they got it in a trivia message. And I think that's just part of giving people a really unique experience and engaging experience, different from what we're doing in our email or social or other programs. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is James Servino from HRC. My pronouns are he, him. And HRC's mobile program started way back in like 2007, and actually we branded it as a community mobile action network. We saw it as a real investment in our members and supporters to meet them where they're at and give them immediate, like time-sensitive, deadline-oriented actions where they can make an impact. A lot of that was around direct advocacy and contacting their legislators, or in breaking news like when marriage equality came down. One of my favorite anecdotes was from one of our board members. But this is before push notifications for the most part, right? So he was out at the opera in San Francisco, and he announced before the opera started that he got a text from HRC that Prop 8 was struck down. So much of our growth in those early years was tied to like people wanting to make an impact, get that news, and on our part, wanting to build community and meet our members and supporters where they're at. So when I'm talking about our texting program, it's primarily broadcast. So we have a different strategy for our peer-to-peer texting. That's kind of what you hear from like Hustle. That's not necessarily opt-in programs for text messaging. So when we do broadcast text messaging, the platform that we use is Mobile Commons, and it's broadcast text messaging similar to how Engaging Networks is starting to roll out into our broadcast platform. So here are just some examples of some of the messages that we send. We try to mix both advocacy and fundraising. I like to think that all of our messages are fundraising because every action lands you on a post-action fundraising, outside of our just true kind of cultivations where we're providing kind of community resources or town halls, et cetera. The other thing that we used a lot in our messaging was trying to get our kind of indices, so like how we rate companies based on how they treat their LGBTQ plus employees, to our members and supporters. So when they're shopping at Macy's, they could text HRC and get a score of how Macy's treats their scores on our equality index. And then also how we could augment and supplement our activism on email, but by getting calls when we're being told like we need calls to this district like today because the vote is, we could be really precise and strategic in trying to make an impact. And we can report back to our members and supporters on the impact that they're doing. Fundraising has been a part for at least the last 5 years in terms of us being able to grow from just Mobile Action Network to really it being a reliable pipeline for fundraising for the organization. And if you want to get involved, you can text Equality Act to 472-472, or you can even text sticker to 472-472. That's one of our other ways that a lot of people join our list. They can get their equality sticker and show their support. I also wanted to highlight some of the fundraising campaigns that have been successful for us year in, year out. Not just matching campaigns, but really trying to meet the moment when our members and supporters maybe aren't in their email inbox, but can see big news like Ron DeSantis announcing his presidential run. And then we lean in on MMS when we both have great content to show, but also like when there's a specific premium or something that we want to get in front of our members and supporters. That, as we've grown our list, now our list is over 840,000, we've had to be more strategic on where we layer in MMS. MMS images and long-form text messages, it can be really cost prohibitive for a program. So the things that I'd probably just mention in terms of as you're growing and building out your program is making sure that you have really good data syncing between your tool sets. If you're using Engaging Networks, it's great because it's all there. But for us, it was really important to make sure that if we're texting our members and supporters, it should be a really seamless action on their end part. So we made sure that our data was synced so far that you literally clicked one link, we preloaded the form, you just had to hit a button to take action. So yeah, I think that's it for
And then I would also like to invite Mart to get up. Those buckets I was talking about, Ocean Conservancy or HRC are both in kind of bucket A. They had established messaging programs through another platform, but I wanted to have Marta join us to talk a little bit about the Engaging Networks tool specifically.
Hello everyone, my name is Marta. I work on a product team alongside Dan Szymczak as well as Hani, who's joined us recently. and I actually took part in developing marketing tools, so I'm very excited to be here. So we've launched bulk SMS and MMS sending back in February alongside our marketing tools. And it's quite an easy system where you can just easily build messages, add images, add links to your pages that you've set up on your in your Engaging Networks account. We also have quick SMS keyword functionality where you can send automated messages to your supporters based on short keywords that they text you. So this is quite interesting because you can not only provide them with information, links, but you can also automatically sign them up to your lists or sign them as having participated in specific campaigns that you've created in your Engaging Networks platform. There are quite a lot of powerful tools that's been added alongside SMS functionality, and that's some things that you've already familiar with alongside email tools. So conditional content, one-click donations, and split testing as well, which can be leveraged when you're sending your SMS messages. And finally, it's really easy to set it up. So all you need is a Twilio account, set up SID, authentication token, and configure your messaging. And you're ready to go pretty much. So after adding it into your Engaging Networks account, you're ready pretty much to send. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marta. Okay, we're going to have a little discussion before the Q&A portion, but I wanted to start by, you said 2007 you started your Mobile Action Network, and then 2017 for Ocean Conservancy. I mean, that's quite a long time. And when did M&R start tracking this or start doing research?
For text messaging, I feel like we've been tracking as part of the study at least 5 years. But
5 years. Okay. So those are all pretty early on, I would say. Before I was just getting text messages regularly from nonprofits for the most part. So I'd like to ask a little bit about that kind of initial motivation and what made your organizations decide to kind of take the leap into this whole new program with a lot of compliance issues and things like that you have to think about, and kind of what were those major considerations? You can start with James.
Well, thankfully it happened before I got to HRC. I started in 2008. But HRC really wanted to try and innovate here. Actually, I think M&R and a number of our other consultant partners helped us in terms of where we would start. And for, I want to say the first almost 10 years, it really was an investment program. We really weren't raising, it wasn't a reliable revenue stream, but we saw it as, and it's paid dividends for us in terms of as email deliverability goes down, it gives us another way to re-engage people. Our literal opt-out for email gets them on the mobile list. Often those people then resubscribe to email. So it gives us this channel to really re-engage people at really critical times.
Oh, brilliant. Rob?
Yeah, I also inherited our mobile program, but I will say that, I don't have to tell anybody here, deliverability problems, getting in people's inboxes, open in those inboxes, is just more and more of a struggle. And so mobile is a new opportunity to engage folks who aren't clicking on those emails in those inboxes, but also people who, when you look at a lot of our Gen Z people who might not have an email at all, or at least don't check it often, mobile is a really important avenue as well for cultivation of new donors and younger folks.
yeah, I would add, I think some of the reasons why mobile is so important today is, I mentioned earlier, now some text messages are raising more than some email blasts going out. And for the reasons that you all shared, those are all kind of super top of mind, email deliverability. But I remember I worked on HRC's text messaging program in 2008 or 2009. And even then, one of the tests that we ran showed that the people receiving text messages gave more to email when they were getting those text messages. And so that helped bolster the case. Even if we're not seeing direct revenue from this, it still is a revenue driver. And that kind of stuck with me for a really long time, thinking these things out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can, just speaking from the perspective of a donor, I'm thinking back, and most of my donations are through email or just going to the website. But those texts that I receive from HRC and Ocean Conservancy, they serve to reinforce my relationship with your organization. You know, it's keeping you in my mind, right? So even if I'm not necessarily, of course I do like doing the quizzes and things like that, you know, and it's very easy to complete an action, but I just having that reminder of my relationships with your organizations, I think are very valuable and, you know, contribute to the direction of my donations. So yeah, we talked. So we talked a little bit now then about how you know, sometimes text messages can raise more than email, but how does the messaging content differ from email? So how do you what's important to keep in mind as you craft those messages? You know, I know you all use a lot of images, MMS, and you all, it's a lot of sort of immediacy of the need, but how do you determine whether this is better as a mobile message or as an email or as both?
I can say for us that oftentimes, I mean, you just hit on it, like immediacy, any sort of time where it's like donate now or we have a short run of some sort of premium, those are really great opportunities for mobile. And then I would say, like, for us, yeah, we use a lot of MMS. We are very lucky to have a whole host of very adorable animals who live in the ocean. And it helps us a lot. So we are very image heavy. So oftentimes, like, if we have something like Sea Otter Awareness Day or something that is like a moment in time that gives us a special message for that day, we'll often run a fundraising message there using that photo, using that call to action specific to that animal.
Yeah, I'd say it's both as well. Like, and what I love about the medium of text messaging is it requires a discipline. Like, is this require a text message? Like, in trying to meet our members and supporters where they are, we are literally interrupting like their day in some way. So making sure that it is a relevant or time-sensitive message, and then reiterating that with them and respecting their time. So like making sure our message flow and strategy reflects the text message medium.
You know, one thing just to add to that, I'm primarily a fundraiser, but one of the things that I see so effectively coming through in text messaging is for groups that run advocacy campaigns doing call-in actions through text message. It just blows away anything you can do in email because they already have their phone there in front of them. And so being able to run those kinds of campaigns is a really great way to do high impact advocacy.
Yeah, I also really like that the discipline aspect of it. As a poetry guy, I appreciate the the effort that goes into crafting a short, accessible message, like haiku or something, in some ways. I'd like to hear a little bit about and this might have been a bit before your time, but maybe you could provide some insight, like the initial rollout plan and how that was determined. Do you know if your organizations already had, if you'd been collecting mobile opt-ins just in case, or phone opt-ins just in case over time, or was it something did you have a push to acquire subscribers after deciding to launch?
I will say I know that we did have a small collection that we started with, like a couple thousand, very, very small, that we had collected on forums beforehand. It is really nice to have some of those collections. And then I think one of the biggest things, and I'll just say going through a transition to our shortcode to keep in mind, is there are an increasing number of regulations now around mobile. So it's really important to check in with your mobile providers about like what double opt-in needs to happen before you can start using those lists. And also what carrier regulations are around. For instance, once we got our own shortcode, now we can't have that automatic check mark that was like the most crucial part of building our list. And so we have to be a lot more intentional about making sure that people are opting in and they're making that choice, which kind of changed our ask around mobile from being something that's like an addition we have on a form to being something that's more dedicated, like here's what our mobile list does and we want you to join that exclusively, and really having to show the value added in joining our mobile list.
It's evolved for us. At first, we were testing over an extended period of time, like which phone number to ask for, because at that time when we first got started, we were still wanting to collect home phone number for some of our donors and supporters. We've evolved just like the program has, and one of the case studies that Johnny was mentioning was we did a case study of the value of a mobile phone number donor supporter versus a non, and those people who provided their mobile phone number to us were 3.5 times more likely to make a gift than someone who didn't. And then for us, that's what we were like, we're collecting mobile phone number everywhere. It makes sense, right? If I'm gonna give you my mobile phone and opt into this, then I wanted like a deeper connection with the organization. So yeah, we ask for, similar to what Robin said in her presentation, we ask for mobile phone number everywhere and ask for people to opt in. And that mobile phone number is also an opt-in for our telemarketing communication. So it's kind of lifted all boats, the program.
Nice. And Marta, maybe you could speak to what kind of tools are available within the platform to help with compliance and making sure folks are opted in.
In terms of compliance, we've got a mobile opt-in, which is linked to your Twilio account. So whenever you start using SMS messaging, you would add your credentials for Twilio inside Engaging Networks, and alongside of that, you would select which mobile opt-in question would be used for SMS sending. So therefore, when you start sending, you'll need to first of all make sure, obviously, that the mobile number is added in the correct format, so we can actually deliver that message, but also that the supporters are opted in to that relevant list to make sure that you're allowed to reach out to them in using that medium.
Yeah, and in addition to the keywording tools that allow you to make opt-outs very easy as well, right? Because as our panelists have discussed, there are a lot of rules, compliance rules around this. So making sure that your messages are going to the folks who want them and that the folks who don't have an off-ramp is very crucial and something we wanted to make sure was available to you. Let's talk a little bit about your KPIs. How do you track the success of a mobile messaging campaign in the program overall? Let's start with, Johnny, do you have any sort of high-level view on how folks are? I mean, you all are obviously sharing things like engagement rates and funds that are generated and things like that. Do you see some common ones among the folks you work with?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. So we put out our benchmarks report in April, and then we immediately start thinking about, okay, what metrics are we going to add the next year? What do we need to change in our data collection processes to do that? And one of the metrics that we haven't had for mobile for yet, and we're hoping to roll out next year, is a very simple one. It is fundraising response rate in response to a text message. And the reason we haven't had that is that so often the email that sends out the text message is not the same email that processes the donations. And so organizations don't consistently have that metric to report out on. That, I feel like, is one of the most important KPIs, and we're going to be asking for it this year. I'm excited to be able to report on it.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, I'll say we just started this year tracking how much donations are through mobile and how many people click on our advocacy and complete an advocacy action. In addition, our two most important ones are list growth. So how is our mobile list growing? And then engagement rate. And I will just put in a huge plug to track engagement rate really early. As we are starting to see Apple and other messaging providers roll out spam spam and other filters similar to what we all dealt with email. It's really important so that we can remain in those primary inboxes to really think about how we're crafting the most engaging messages to go out and tracking that rate of response and link clicks, because it will become really crucial to stay in those inboxes and keep your mobile a really good channel going forward.
Yeah, we are always paying attention to us because it is such a fundraising channel to revenue as well as engagement. So now the kind of practices that we've layered in on our email program of like engagers and whether they've clicked, like we're layering that now on text messaging, not just for cost savings, but also for like the strategy of the program, and for us as well, opt-out rates and our churn. And then something that we're paying attention and digging through right now is people who, similar to email, that churn of opting out, opting back in. It's a more difficult process for that to occur on text messaging due to regulations. So we're trying to figure out how to get the sizable amount of people who have opted out in the past, but who have subsequently tried to opt in, getting them a more streamlined pathway to get back into messaging.
Great, thank you so much. So, yeah, with that in mind, Marta, maybe you could kind of address quickly what the benefits to running your messaging program through engaging networks might be.
Sure. So there are a few of them. For those of you who are using Engaging Networks as an integrated platform, that's going to be an easy one because the data is already there, right? So if you are collecting supporter records through collecting donations or advocacy pages or any other initiatives that you run on Engaging Networks, the data is there for you, available for you to start sending, and there's no data sync required, which otherwise you would need to leverage in order to move this data from a third-party system, from Engaging Networks to a third-party system in order to start sending. Additionally, you've got a number of cool benefits which are available as part of SMS sending, and namely conditional content, split testing, personalization, which of course is available for you to use, taking advantage of the data that's Engaging Networks as well. Finally, of course, the cost comes into play as well. So if you're just getting started, if you just want to try it out, it's actually free of charge to start sending within a limit of 500 opt-in records, mobile opt-in records. So that gives you a possibility to get started, and then we've got quite attractively pricing structure if you want to start using it on a scale as well.
Thanks. So I want to make sure we leave time for Q&A, but I did want to just ask one last question for each of you, which would be, what do you think is the best piece of advice you could give for staff who want to advocate internally for starting a messaging program at their organization? How do they make that case and get that time and that budget allocated?
I would start by thinking of a messaging plan that supplements your existing kind of strategy and email. Pull out like what are the most popular things that activate your list or introduce start collecting obviously the opt-ins and build the kind of data structure that you need. If you're doing it in Engaging Networks, it's great because like it is extensive work on our part over years to get to where we're at in terms of our users having a seamless experience. So I'd say start with the strategy, work out the messaging plan, and start building up the audience and do a lot of testing.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say too, just like really thinking about the audience, like is there a specific audience that you guys aren't reaching, whether or not that's, the folks that want those rapid response advocacy updates, or a younger audience, like who are those folks? Because that will help guide that plan of like what messages you're doing, what you're going to send, and really help set you up to a point to like test those assumptions and get that high engagement.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. It's so often that we'll talk with a client about a strategy to reach a specific audience, and then we look at that audience and realize, oh, we can only email a third of these people. Like, how else can we reach them? And sometimes text messaging is part of the puzzle. but looking at every possible way we can get to reach an audience that we're trying to get to is really important. The other thing I would just add to that is use our benchmarks report to help build the case, because all the data is there, mrbenchmarks.com. There you go.
Yeah. I have a hard copy of that too. It's awesome. I love having the hard copy.
And one more thing to add about this is what's relevant as well is when you send those messages. So we do have, within marketing tools or engaging networks, there's also send time optimization feature, which is pretty cool because it allows you to send those messages at the time that's relevant to the recipient who is receiving them, if you happen to be sending to global audiences.
Great, thank you. Well, I just want to thank all of our panelists for all your contributions. We're going to get into Q&A now. So if any Engaging Network staff has access to Slido, that would be great, so we could address those questions. But if anyone in the room has a question, we can start there. Just give it 1 second for the mic to get over there so the online folks can hear as well.
For organizations that don't have an established SMS program, if you could give one point of advice on what to take when starting one up, what would it be?
Add the opt-in to all your forms. You can actually grow one relatively quickly, particularly if you have a big advocacy program and you're launching petitions all the time. If you have a text messaging opt-in on your petition forms, over the course of a few months, a large percentage of the people who take action on your forums are going to opt into receiving text messages from you. So you can, it builds and builds over time, but you can actually get a pretty fast start that way.
I'd also just say, from like a nerdy compliance kind of thing, like making sure that you have a team and you have structures in place to make sure, because there are things that need to be sent with every email. There are setups that you need to ensure with forms. Just having that whole group, if you're working with a large team, cohesion around like how we're using the data that we collect, and making sure that all of our messages are in compliance, especially, like I said, with mobile carriers, cracking down, learning that compliance and really making those systems is important.
Yes, compliance is important. And also, I would say, kind of to the discipline that I talked about before, like always be centered, like, is this worth a text message? Like, I think that it's difficult to build up the trust with your audience. It's just so easy to lose it in an SMS program.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that from a compliance perspective, there are a lot of resources available, especially ones that Twilio has provided directly to us. So if you look in the Academy course, there's a whole presentation from Twilio on compliance and the things you need to start to think about. All right, sorry to interrupt you back there in the back, please.
Oh, no problem. Robin, I noticed there were a lot of emojis in some of the text messages. I was curious if you tested that, and I'm curious about how you and James manage making things feel personal versus produced. Does that affect opt-outs? Do you get fewer opt-outs when you make it look more personal? Just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely tested emoji use. I'm going to make one note about emojis, at least with Mobile Commons. We do them in all of our MMS, but in SMS, they count towards 72 characters, which is oftentimes way too much for the value they provide. I mean, emoji might say 1,000 words, but you can't convey everything. So we actually tested them with our emails first. And found that they were doing really well in our subject lines. We moved that over to mobile. But that's also very much our brand. So I think it also depends on your audience. We have much more of a playful voice in our digital tools, and so it makes sense for us to use them.
Yeah, when we first started, we tested, but in reality, it's character count. So where it makes sense in an MMS we don't go excessively. It takes up so many characters, it's cost prohibitive for us in some cases. But all of our personalization, all of those things we have layered in and at some point tested. We do personalize all of our text messages. We segment there's many iterations of every text message that goes out. And primarily when we're using images, it's because it's either a captivating call to action or it's a premium that we think people will really respond to. Oh, and personas. So similar to how you said, this is our persona. So like we tried to like build up a persona. So the predecessor, Drew Daniels, who's here, we started signing off these text messages. You should just be like corporate, just HRC. And we tried to like introduce members of the team signing off on the messages to kind of like build an even deeper relationship. So yeah. Oh, and then emojis, you always have the test because like 6 different carriers will have it different ways, different devices. So, and you can get into hot water because they look very different for different people.
Okay, thank you. All right, so before we move into the Slido questions.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, right on. For late adopters into the mobile space, like future oriented, are we at a point of saturation? What's the time? What does 3 to 5 years look like in this place where mobile is capturing, where email is failing?
Good question.
I don't think we're at a point of saturation, but I do think we are at a point where people are more choosy about more intentional about opting in and opting out, because there just are so many opt-ins. If anybody's ordered anything online and all of a sudden you get like 7 text messages about it, I think that people are more inundated, so they are far more likely to opt out than just having it go to their phone. And again, with carriers, we are starting to see things like spam filters in their interest to kind of help people filter that out of inboxes. So I don't think we're at peak. I do think we're starting to see down the line similar things to what happened with email, where you really have to have that high engagement in order to stay as effective. And so that's where this discipline of like really thinking about what we're sending and how it's useful is so important if you want to wade into the mobile space.
Great, thanks. So I see we have some questions from the folks online. Where should we start? Let's see. Are these ones for this current Austin?
I'm removing the ones that are not.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Let's see. What was the hardest part, the biggest lift for getting an SMS program set up? I like that one.
So for us, initially it was the cost. And so I really credit our previous leadership, because they treated this as an investment program for the first decade. So we knew it was going to be a cost. We never relied on it as a revenue. Now it's grown into that. So being able to build up a community and invest in it, because this can be a significant investment if you're growing a successful program, is important.
I would say for us, in addition, just the acquisition, now that it is getting harder to automatically have people enroll into the program, we really need that intentional opt-in. So, looking for new places for people to join our list, making compelling opt-ins to really make people feel motivated to join our list. And being really protective of our list so that we don't have those opt-outs. I think that's the hardest part.
Sean, you mentioned in the intro section that there might be some folks who are looking at but where's my extra hours in the day to run this program? I feel like that's also where I see a lot of groups struggle when launching a text messaging program, is having the brain space to dedicate to really making the most of it.
Yeah, definitely. Here's a question for James. Do you find the sticker offering to work well?
Yes, sticker works great everywhere. But what we've changed to on here is primarily we drive to engaging networks forms for everything, but for the sticker program in the last 2 years, we've now just tried to keep people within the text messaging stream. So rather than driving to a browser, literally you reply with your address and reprocess that. And we've seen an increase in terms of conversion there from that immediate opt-in. And then you sync over that data. So it's one of those things that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Right now, a supporter must have an email address in Engaging Networks to have a profile. Is there a possibility that in the future, mobile number is an alternative to email address?
It's always a possibility, I guess. But so at the moment we use email address as the unique identifier, and I guess it depends as we see more uptake in use of SMS messaging, and there'll arise a need for that. We'll have to revisit, but at the moment we don't have clear plans around that.
So maybe at some point, at least, like potentially those automatically assigned emails, like the @noaddress.ea, could be pulled into a profile if we see demand for that.
So that's what's happening at the moment. When you create a record without a valid email address, will auto-generate an email.
Okay, let's see. Which SMS platform does Ocean Conservancy use?
We're also at Mobile Commons with Applin.
Yes.
I didn't see my question on here, so I'm just going to ask it. We're also currently on Mobile Commons with our short code. It's not my job. Twilio. Can we do both? Can we also use our same short code on Engaging Networks? Do they get a second short code? Okay, so you should talk. I should talk to you after. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the short answer after much back and forth is that it is transferable, but not something that you could use simultaneously from both providers. Actually, speaking of like short codes, and I want to get to the rest of these, but I do want to ask about the decision-making process. What are you thinking about when it comes to short codes, long codes, toll-free numbers, etc.? You all made the move, right? So what were you thinking behind that?
It's cheaper to just be on a shared code, so we were there for 12 years. But you're kind of in the you're at the mercy of your other colleague organizations or even political organizations sometimes, campaigns that are using the same short code. So for us, it was really important to make the investment and switch to have our own dedicated short code. So when you text 472, that's just HRC, whereas previously we had to kind of migrate everybody from a shared short code. I think it's worth the investment once you get to a sizable start, but I think you're totally fine using either a long form or a short form to get started.
Yeah, I mean, we did it also, we were sharing with an NGO that took the keyword ocean from us, so that was one of the reasons, but also we were also sharing it with a presidential nominee, and it mostly was separated, but every once in a while we'd get a message just like, that is not for us. And I think also, like, a lot of carriers are considering whether or not to do away with shared short code. I don't think that's an immediate thing, but I think it was enough of a future possibility that it was worth us to make the investment in the switch.
Okay, so we will answer all the rest of these. We'll get those answers to you. There is pricing for higher numbers. It goes up to 50,000 opted-in supporters after that, and then up to unlimited. But we can answer all those questions. I don't remember the exact annual cost. And we'll make sure to get the rest of these answered as well. But I want to take a second to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Marta, who's visiting us here from the UK just for this conference. Thank you, James. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Johnny. It was really great to hear from you all today.